welcome back to the Watchung Booksellers Podcast, where we bring you conversations from our independent bookstore's rich community of book professionals who talk about what they do for the love of books. Thanks for joining us. I'm Kathryn, and I'm here with my co-producer, Marnie. Hey, Marnie.
Hey, Kathryn.
And today we are airing an in-store event that we had recently with authors Benjamin Wallace and Jason Tanz.
Yeah, they were with us to launch Ben's latest book, The Mysterious Mr. Nakamoto, a 15-year quest to unmask the secret genius behind crypto. And it was such a fascinating conversation that we thought we'd share it with you today.
Both authors are Montclair locals, and interestingly, the entire project began when Jason tasked Ben to write an article about crypto while they were working together at Wired magazine. Marnie, at this point, we usually ask each other what we're reading, but we are actually knee-deep in planning some amazing events that we should plug instead.
Yeah, we're really excited for next Thursday, April 24th. We'll be celebrating our first anniversary of the Watchung Booksellers Podcast.
Woohoo!
With a live in-store recording in the kids' room. We're having a book discussion of Loved and Missed by Susie Boyd, led by Alice Elliott Dark and Dagmara Dominchik. And like any good book club, we'll have wine, snacks, and cake. And you'll get first dibs on our new Watchung Booksellers tote bag, hats, and notebooks. This is a book that we've all been talking about. We've all been reading. It came out in 2023 in the U.S. It's contemporary fiction. It's such a beautiful book. Kathryn and I love it, and we had a great conversation with Alice and Dagmara about it. So we thought it'd be really fun to do it as a live event for the pod. So we'd love to have you. You can register online, and we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, and it is just a really beautiful book, and it's less than a couple hundred pages, very easy to read, but so much to discuss. So it's going to be a great topic, and you can pick it up in store now and definitely have it finished by the time the club arrives on the 24th. And as mentioned, it's the podcast's first birthday, but it's also a birthday of someone special at Watchung Booksellers. So we'll be celebrating that too. So we hope you can make it to it. And right after that event, on Saturday, April 26th, we are going to be celebrating our annual Independent Bookstore Day. But this year, we are going all out with a New Jersey Diner-themed day that incorporates some of our wonderful community partners and charities. Asia and Evelyn have been working their tails off on creating some just incredible merchandise and fun themed events. Neighborhood Coffee Shop Local will be serving special booked name drinks. There's hats, totes, notebooks, these super cute lapel pins that have both the store and the podcast logos. And recently, we had Kat Min on the show, and she is a great friend to the store, and she created this beautiful little tote for kids. We're going to donate the proceeds from sales of that tote to the local charity Arc of Essex County. And also that day, both stores are offering 20% discount on all books. And we'll also be having a live pop-up recording booth in the flagship store from 10 to 2. So you are not going to want to miss it. It's on Saturday, April 26th.
Okay, let's get to the chat. Benjamin Wallace is the New York Times bestselling author of The Billionaire's Vinegar. He has been a feature writer at New York Magazine and a contributing editor at Vanity Fair.
And Jason Tanz is a writer at Salesforce and was formerly the editor-in-chief at Lyft. Before that, he worked at Wired for many years. He is author of Other People's Property, A Shadow History of Hip-Hop in White America.
Enjoy the conversation, and we'll be back after to fill you in on what's coming up in the store.
This is a little bit of a full circle moment because as you so generously share in the book, we worked together on your first Bitcoin story back in 2011. Little did I know, first of all, what Bitcoin would become and what would happen with crypto, but also that this would also spark a 14-year obsession on your part. So what captured your imagination about that story? Because I had no idea for many, many years that you had gone off chasing, down this rabbit hole.
I definitely had no idea where Bitcoin was going either. And you may remember or not that the article in Wired was headlined "The Rise and Fall of Bitcoin," and it now is on a website called Bitcoin Obituaries. That's one of like 400 articles that prematurely, predicted the demise of Bitcoin. So, and at the time, I think it had gone I don't know, it had risen a few $100s and it had gone back down, and then obviously it went back up and went back up. But I do remember that when you approached me to do the story, this was just after Silk Road, the dark web marketplace, was first making the news, and I think that's kind of what put it on journalists' radars. And I remember it was just completely fascinating to me as the way you described it. I mean, it's this alternative parallel money system. No one knows who invented it. And I remember I was at the time I felt kind of overwhelmed with other work. And at first I was like, I don't know if I can do it. And I just 2 days later, I went back and looked at my emails. Like I was like, if it's still available, like I definitely want to do that story, because I could not stop thinking about it, because it was just so kind of mind-bending that there was this money that was completely unlike any money that had existed up to that point.
I don't want to presume, but I imagine we might have a lot of normies in the audience tonight. So can you just give an overview of what a blockchain is, like 30 seconds, and like what Satoshi Nakamoto did that was so unique? Because a lot of these ideas were already out there in the ether. So what was it about this essay that Satoshi wrote that was so important?
Right. Okay. So there was a problem with trying to create digital money that was called the double spending problem, which is basically like if you create money that on the internet that is a string of letters or numbers or whatever, what's to stop someone from copy pasting it? What's to stop there from being rampant counterfeiting, runaway money supply, et cetera? So Satoshi Nakamoto's breakthrough was solving the double spending problem. And the way he did that was with a bunch of arcane computer science methods that I'm not going to get into today, but that's the gist of what he did. But the effect of solving that problem was to create a money that did not depend on a government or a bank, which all prior money had. All prior money had depended on a central authority who could keep the record of, debits and credits in their database of, this bank owes you this amount of money, that's what the amount in your account, that kind of thing. So the blockchain was essentially recreating that centralized database in a decentralized way. And it was putting a ledger that was publicly visible and transparent on the internet, which showed everybody's sort of account. Anyone could look at it, anyone could check it, anyone could see all of the transactions that took place on it. And the way that Satoshi Nakamoto solved the problem of how to do this was that instead of being maintained by a government or bank, this ledger was maintained by a crowd, the peer-to-peer crowd of volunteers who contributed their computers to the network. And then, again, through some of the computer science of how Bitcoin works, this crowd of computers could agree on a shared version of this ledger. That's the blockchain.
That is really well done. I have to say, I've read probably 1,000 different descriptions of the blockchain, but that is the right level of abstraction for me, at least. So very nice.
I've been thinking about how to talk about it for 2 years. I mean, while I was working on the book, I would have people say, like, what is Bitcoin? And I would just pause and be like, God, what is Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Even after being in the weeds on it for a long time.
So Satoshi designed this whole system and then disappeared. And there have been many attempts, as you recount very entertainingly in this book, to uncover this person's identity. When did that become the question for you? When did that become the angle into the Bitcoin story for you?
I mean, that was part of the assignment as you presented it to me. So that was that's when I first learned about it. I mean, you assigned me the story in June of 2011, and Satoshi Nakamoto had made his last known communications in April of 2011. So it was only like 2 months old. And I think it was only really a few months before that people began to wonder, like, who is Satoshi Nakamoto? Because for a while, people were like, oh, I guess he's just some guy. Like, he's some guy we don't know about, but he's just someone on the internet. And only after some time did people realize, oh, it's a pseudonym. This is not the creator's real name. But so people were already asking that question by the time I started reporting that story for Wired. And that probably was the most, it is the most normie-friendly aspect of the whole Bitcoin phenomenon, because it's just a great mystery. It's like why did this person come up with this revolutionary technology and then never take credit for it? Supposedly, controls 1.1 million Bitcoins, could be fantastically wealthy, would be in the top 20 richest people in the world right now, assuming Bitcoin continues to go up, as it likely will based on its history. Satoshi Nakamoto could easily become the richest person in the world. And we've all recently seen how important it can be, how much influence the richest person in the world can have.
Yes, indeed. The other aspect of this book that I really liked is you give a kind of intellectual history, a precursor to the blockchain, to digital currency. Can you talk a little bit about, I wrote it down. I'm not going to embarrass myself by turning on my phone to look up the word, but it's the extropians, do I have that right?
Extropians and the cypherpunks.
And the cypherpunks, right. Can you talk a little bit about
Sure.
what they stood for?
Sure. So there were these two groups that were kind of techno-utopian, Silicon Valley-based subcultures, starting really in the early 90s, as the internet was, becoming a thing. And the cypherpunks were a group of cryptographers and cryptography-interested people who were focused on what at the time was a major issue in politics and government, in that the government was trying to keep strong cryptography classified as a munition. It was in the same munitions classification as like Tomahawk missiles. And the cypherpunks wanted cryptography to be available to everybody. And so they started essentially illegally exporting public key cryptography to the rest of the world, so that it would just be basically like the horses left the barn. These people tended to be libertarians, a lot of them. And part of the libertarian project was also to have a money that was free of government and banks. And so that's sort of their connection to it. So they were one of the things they were talking about a lot on the internet forums and that sort of thing was digital money and how to make it real. And the other group, which shared a lot of members with the cypherpunks, were the extropians. The extropians were into extreme life extension, like up to and including cryonically preserving yourself when you die. And they were just very they were into everything positive about the future. I mean, they were like AI, memes, everything that is sort of a preoccupation of Silicon Valley today, they were talking about in the early 90s. And so they were also interested in digital money, both as a sort of new and better money, like money's, why do we need money that gets dirty and, can spread germs and you can tear your dollar bills, and we could just this needs a product update. So that was sort of their initial interest in digital money. And their other interest in it was because since they were all going to be living forever, they needed to have a technology that could ensure that when they were reanimated after their deep freeze of decades or longer, their money was still there, right? So they were talking about digital money as that sort of thing.
That's great scenario planning. So you're an English major with no, right? English major, I have that right? With no CS background before taking this on. What gave you the cojones to think that you were going to be the one to crack this enduring mystery?
I mean, initially delusion, because when I was assigned it by you, I was like, what a great mystery, and I'm looking forward to cracking it. And I didn't, and neither did anybody else. Or some people thought they did, and then they would name some person as like, we found Satoshi, and then they'd be like, oh, I guess we didn't, and they were wrong. And so, I don't know, I just thought it was going to be like a regular investigative reporting story where you talk to enough people, you find the people who, for whatever, agenda on their part, they want to talk to you, and the story will come up. And this turned out not to obey those laws of reporting. It seemed like nobody knew who Satoshi was. There wasn't like the inner circle who you thought well, they probably know, but they're just not telling me. And if I find the one disgruntled one, they'll spill beans.
Right.
There wasn't that person. There was no kind of center to the secret. And so that didn't happen at that time. I then, the article was published. We named some usual suspects who continued to be usual suspects. And these were people who had been cypherpunks and extropians, and maybe they had previously published their own ideas for digital money. So they would seem likely possibilities to be Satoshi Nakamoto. And then, time passed, and every year or two, someone would come up with a new Satoshi Nakamoto candidate. And each time it happened, everyone would get really excited and think, oh, you found the great white whale. And every time it was wrong for this reason or that. So I kind of kept tabs on it from afar. Every now and then I would get an email unsolicited from either someone claiming to be Satoshi or someone who said they knew who Satoshi was. And by this point, I sort of became jaded about it because none of them ever turned out to be Satoshi. So like in late 2015, I got an email claiming some Australian computer scientist named Craig Wright was Satoshi Nakamoto, and here's some, leaked documents from his computer system. And the subject header said in brackets, like, not virus scanned, like the way your computer generates that when there's probably malware. So I just did not click on any of the documents. And I archived it. And Craig Wright was then named by Wired, when you weren't there, of course, by Wired and by Gizmodo as, like, we think we actually finally do have Satoshi Nakamoto. And Craig Wright turned out to be one of the great con men of the 21st century and is definitely not Satoshi Nakamoto. And last year, an English court finally just said it as definitively as, he'd been suing all kinds of people for claiming he wasn't Satoshi. And finally, an English court made him post on his website, Craig Wright is not Satoshi Nakamoto. So that kind of kept me involved. And then 2022 comes around, actually 2021, and crypto is like resurging again as it's been doing over the last 13 years. Every few years it booms, then it goes bust. So 2021 it's booming again. It's going mainstream in a bigger way than it ever had before. And at the same time, I get another one of these emails, and this one's like, Elon Musk is Satoshi Nakamoto. Here's proof. And again, it was one of these rabbit holes where at first it's like, that sounds plausible, and then when you start digging into it, it just didn't like hold water. But it kind of, again, got me like pulled back into the mystery and the search. And at that point, I was like, I think finally there might be a book to write here, because the mystery has existed long enough and enough people have tried in different ways that just that in and of itself is part of the story. Like, why hasn't anyone been able to solve it? And the story is now of much wider interest. Like when we did the story, it was a fringe project, experimental project, very fringe interest. And by 2021, it was really going mainstream.
Well, to that end, I remember when, you first were writing the proposal for this book, as you were saying, crypto was exploding. I remember my my rideshare driver would ask me, hey, are you into crypto, man? This kind of thing. Everybody was talking about it. And then, of course, it all blew up. Sam Bankman-Fried gets arrested. Michael Lewis comes out with his crypto book, which immediately, I haven't read it, but it seems like it did not age very well. How anxious were you? Because I asked you about it, you seemed very cool about it all, but like, how worried were you that like crypto was going to blow up and no one would care about Satoshi anymore?
So yeah, I sold the book during the boom, and then it went bust, right?
Right.
So people would say like, oh, you must be worried, and I wasn't. And the reason, what I was worried about was when I heard Michael Lewis was working on a book about it. That worried me because like he's Michael Lewis. But I wasn't worried about the bust because, again, at this point, crypto had boomed and busted like so many times that it's just part of the way it works. So I knew it would come back, or I felt confident that it would come back, and I thought maybe it would come back in time for when my book is published, right? So I'm going to sell the book in like spring of 2022. It's coming out in spring of 2025, and it is mostly back. The last couple of weeks it's like had a little bit of a downturn, but I think it's largely back, and partly, no doubt because of the current administration.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that too. So many of these, I guess this is a common story from those of us at Wired, but these ideas that were crypto anarchists, really, a lot of them, and a lot of the characters that you write about are certainly on the fringes. This isn't giving anything away. It is from the end of the book, but it's not giving anything away. You write, as a utopian project, Bitcoin had, like all utopian projects, never stood a chance. The magic and wildness were fading, but as a new asset class, it had proved resilient. Its price was rising once again, reaching a new all-time high above $73,000. Fidelity now advised retail clients to allocate a small portion of their investment portfolios to cryptocurrency, and blockchain technology felt inevitable. The creative space it opened up, still exciting. And to your point, it's now penetrating the inner sanctum of the White House. Do you still find it optimistic and exciting? It was a long walk for a ham sandwich, that question.
I don't know if I would quite say optimistic. Like, I've never been a crypto head. I'm not like a true believer in the libertarian project of crypto to the extent that you can even now call it a libertarian project. And certainly within the realm of crypto, there's like a lot. There's an enormous amount of variety, And there's Bitcoin, which is more sort of the hardcore, one of the more libertarian of the more decentralized of the cryptocurrencies, one of the more privacy-oriented ones, although there are even now more privacy-oriented ones like Monero. But then there's all the, kind of the junk, the meme coins, the shit coins, as they're called. I mean, there's so many cryptocurrencies. I think Coinbase currently lists like more than 11,000 cryptocurrencies in existence. So, and 99% of that is probably junk. I still think the technology is really fascinating. I'm still interested to see what it becomes and it is done with it, because I don't think it has found its killer use case. Like, it's not,
Right.
In the early days, they were thinking like, this is going to enable all kinds of financial freedom, like, microtransactions, which was this long sought grail of internet commerce, or cross-border remittances that would make it easier for people in other countries to send money back home to their families without these exorbitant fees that were charged. And none of that has really kind of taken place. Like, the fees in most of the networks are pretty high. Bitcoin itself has gone from the original document laying out what Bitcoin was, which is called the Bitcoin White Paper, said a peer-to-peer electronic currency. It's really not like money. It's now shifted into sort of a store of value and is most similar to a digital gold, Bitcoin itself. And then some of the other, one of the reasons being it's incredibly slow. Like, I don't know what Visa processes some crazy, like tens of thousands of transactions per second, and the Bitcoin network still processes 7 transactions per second.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Now,
And I might even have that right. It might be 7 transactions per minute. It's really slow.
so you also spell out the sort of schism in the Bitcoin world between the BSV, which it's about the size of the blocks, right? And that if you have smaller blocks, you can process more transactions more quickly. Is that
right?
Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because it was this guy, Craig,
Right. Yeah.
this lunatic, who was the main proponent of this branch.
Right. So a few years into Bitcoin's life, like, there grew this kind of schism in the community about like how big should the blocks in the blockchain be? Like, how many transactions should be bundled into each of these blocks? And each of these blocks is generated every 10 minutes. And so the number of transactions in one block basically determines like what's the total transaction capacity of the network. How useful is it as a place where people can, do business? And there was almost like an ideological or philosophical split in the community, and the people who wanted it to be a practical, widely adopted system wanted the blocks to be bigger, because 7 transactions a second or a minute is ridiculous,
Right.
But there was a hardcore kind of clique of more sort of philosophical, ideological Bitcoiners who wanted it to remain small blocks, because if you have small blocks, like, anyone can basically run the system on their computer. And the bigger the blocks are, the more you need computing power. That makes it less democratic, less decentralized. Fewer just like average Joes can participate. It's much more nuanced, but that's the gist of it. And so there were all these schisms. Like, people started spinning off like new cryptocurrencies, like it was like Bitcoin Classic. There were a bunch of them, and there was one called Bitcoin Satoshi Vision that Craig Wright, this fake, this imposter Satoshi who came to be called Fake Toshi, was promoting. And so, since he's Satoshi, it's his vision of what. But to be fair, it also probably was more true to the original Satoshi Nakamoto vision, who did seem to want to create a usable currency.
Right. So, as part of this project, you participated in a couple of ways in this. One is you learned to code. Is that something that you've kept up with at all?
Not really. No.
Yeah.
When you assigned me the story, like, it wasn't just that I was an English major. Like, I was a particularly, slow to see the future English major. And like in the 90s, I was like, why is everyone making such a big deal about the internet? Like, what's the big deal? It's like invention, whatever, like a toaster or something.
Right.
And I was obviously a little, wrong on that one. So in that sense, like, I was not maybe the best person to see the potential of Bitcoin, but I followed it, and I never stopped thinking about the Satoshi mystery, but I did have to make a living, so it's not like I was working on this full time for that 15-year period. And when I got back into it full time in 2022 and started looking at like all the prior attempts to crack the mystery, I was like, I can't just do the same thing everyone else did. I need to bring something new to this. Like, how can I approach this in a way that it has not been approached? And one of the things I decided to do was I need to learn to code, because it seemed like so often the conversation was either like journalist outsiders who, would see some like language that looks similar in Satoshi's writings and something that someone else used and be like, oh, that must be Satoshi. But it would be, if you were actually like into computer science or cryptography, you'd be like, oh, that's just part of the glossary. And so I thought, like, I need to really be conversationally fluent in some of the weeds, that this debate gets into. So I got a tutor and learned to code to a point in Python, because one of the things I wanted to do was basically just take a much wider net and look at a much wider set of candidates, because people kept looking at like the same 10 people who were suspected as possible Satoshis, and either saying one of them was Satoshi or one of them wasn't Satoshi. And I thought it could be from a much wider pool of people. Like, I want to look at all of the extropians. I want to look at all of the cypherpunks. I want to download, a couple decades worth of listserv exchanges onto my computer and then apply some kind of analysis to it. So one of the reasons I wanted to code was so that I could learn to scrape that material onto my computer. And then the other thing I wanted to do was be able to code a tool to statistically analyze those archives once I had them on my computer.
Mm-hmm. And you're writing about, like, as a writer coming to coding relatively late in life, your perspective on it is really great and lyrical. Like the way you write about the power that you sort of, the translation of ideas into actionable.
Right, it was very exciting. It was exciting to learn to code, because I was like, wow, like I got it. I got why coding's such a big deal, and I felt like kind of, why didn't I become a coder? Like, I mean, that's sort of an occupational hazard I found in journalism. Like, every time I work on a story, I'm like, why didn't I do this with my life? Like, because it always seems really interesting, and when they just make it seems easier than it is, but there always is a reason you didn't do it. And so, and the fact that I have not kept up with the coding since finishing needing it for the book, I think speaks to why I didn't become a coder, which is not what I would naturally just do.
Right. That's all going to be prompt engineering soon anyway. So
yeah, exactly.
So be able to do it. And then the other way you participated is you invested in some Bitcoin.
Right.
Talk about that experience.
So when I was working on the Wired story, again, Bitcoin is so abstract and kind of hard to get your head around that I thought, like, I need to buy some Bitcoin to understand what it is. I need to buy it. I need to see how you buy it. I need to know what you do with it. Like, what does it look like? It doesn't look like anything because it's, an abstraction in a computer. But I just needed to sort of deal with it, hands-on. And so I bought $200 worth of Bitcoin. It took me over a week to do this, because back then I had to wire money from my bank account to, I think, a money transmitter business in like Iowa. Then, that took several days to clear. Then they had to send it to an exchange in San Francisco. That took another couple of days. Then I had to send that. Then I sent that money to another exchange. It was just a very elaborate process. So I buy $200 worth of Bitcoin. At the time, it was $17 a coin. Right now, it's like $84,000 a coin. And I send 5 of the coins to a conference that's happening in New York City that's charging 5 Bitcoins to attend. So at the time, it's like, $85 or whatever. And go to the conference, and I took the other 7 and I sent them to an exchange in Tokyo that was considered at the time like there were a lot of fly-by-night exchanges, but this one was like had a good reputation. It was like the big, solid, reliable Bitcoin exchange, and it was called Mt. Gox. And so I send my coins to Mt. Gox. Flash forward to 2014 when Mt. Gox implodes in a fireball of hacks and bankruptcy and scandal, along with my 7 Bitcoins. But it's not like I wasn't going to hold on to the Bitcoin. It's not like I would have held those coins until they were worth $109,000, which they were like a month or 2 ago.
But who's counting?
Exactly. or that would have, or that I thought of exactly what that would be worth now. But Bitcoin had already, in 2014, Bitcoin had already gone over $1,000. I think it had gone back under $500. And I was actually on the verge of selling them because I was like, this is the best investment I ever made. And now it's clearly like about to go to zero.
Right.
So I better like get out while the getting's good. And so I'd actually put in a sell order to Mt. Gox. And then like before it went through, they imploded. So fine. But again, so I would have made, but I would have made, I don't know, $400 on a coin that I spent $17 on, and been very happy to do so. So the only people who would hold on to their coins through all of these rises and falls, you'd have to have some ideological reason to hold them, or else just some very eccentric belief in the potential of it.
Right. Or do they pronounce it Claude, or do they just spell it that
Hodl.
way? Oh, Hodl.
Yeah. So one time someone in the Bitcoin sort of message boards misspelled hold, hodl, and it became like a meme. And like, so now it's like, if you're a hardcore Bitcoin holder, you're called a hodler. And somehow someone has now kind of broken that down, and people will say it stands for hold on for dear life because of the volatility of Bitcoin.
All right. I think we should open this up to the audience for questions. The one question I don't think you should ask is, who is Satoshi? Because you have to buy the book. But I will tell you, it is clearly the man in the derby hat. Does anybody have questions? Yes?
There aren't a ton of women in the Bitcoin world, and there aren't a ton of female libertarians. And I'm just curious if you know what that is about.
It's a good question. I mean, it's definitely true, and there is a reason that there is like a term tech bro and not a term tech sis. I'm sure someone has written eloquently about it, but it's 100% true. It's true in computer science. It's certainly true in the libertarian world. And I don't know the answer. So maybe if someone else here does, I'd be interested to hear it.
The word Satoshi Nakamoto sounds Japanese. Do you have a view if he really is Japanese, or if it's a he?
Well, Satoshi Nakamoto is a male name, so that's why I refer to Satoshi Nakamoto as a he, but I could not say that Satoshi Nakamoto definitely is a he. There's no question that whoever Satoshi Nakamoto is a like native-born English speaker. I mean, it could be a Japanese-American native-born English speaker, but it's definitely not someone in Japan who was born in Japan, because the English is just so idiomatic and sort of like supplely native that I don't have any doubt about that. One of the early Bitcoin websites was registered from like a youth hostel in Tokyo. So it kind of, that's the one thing that in Japan that actually syncs up with the name. But there's a lot of reasons also to think it's not a Japanese person. And I mean, one of the trademarks of Satoshi Nakamoto's English is it has an inconsistent use of British and American English spellings. And so that's always been part of the story and aura around Satoshi, like what explains that inconsistency.
Right, but then there you can always start second guessing yourself and be like, well, he would want to trick us by...
Exactly, that it was a deliberate misdirection, etc.
How hard is it to manufacture crypto? And are there any things that control limits on how much currency there is in the market?
So one of the features of Bitcoin that made it very appealing to libertarians is that it had a hard capped money supply of 21 million coins, which it will asymptotically reach in like 2142, but it's already like 19 point something million of the coins have been produced, but it's going to take another 100 plus years for the rest to come out because of just, the cadence of release. And every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin you get in return as a reward for mining it halves, and so the amount you get becomes less and less for successfully mining Bitcoin. How hard is it? It's gotten harder and harder. I mean, the original miners, which is just a miner is just someone who contributes their computer to the network. And so it's a little bit of a misnomer, but in return for contributing your computer to the network, you get to participate in this kind of puzzle solving that is it's a cryptographic puzzle solving that helps secure the network, but also provides a way for the network to mint new Bitcoins, because whoever wins the race to successfully solve the puzzle for each new block gets this Bitcoin reward. So anyway, so in the beginning, everyone could just do it with their laptop, and then people started using graphics cards just to have faster computers that could be more successful in the race. Then people started using ASICs, which are application-specific integrated circuits cards. which were even more powerful. So it's been like this arms race. And at this point, like for it to be worth your while to do, you kind of have to be doing it at scale. And so like most crypto mining is either done by large crypto mining operations that are corporations, or by people who do it as part of a pool. And a lot of the crypto network is now mined through these giant mining pools that are made up of smaller contributors.
So I find it interesting how these ideas and around these small groups of people or end up evolving over time. So I'm interested to hear your perspective on, while the idea of Bitcoin obviously has gone mainstream as a store of money, how much of the ideals or the ideas behind its creation do you think have gone mainstream or not, and why?
I think that most of the ideas have not gone mainstream, and most, I cannot prove this with like polling data, but I think like most people don't care at all about the stuff that the hardcore crypto people think is important. Like I think most people care about convenience. They care about speed. They care about ease of use. Crypto is really difficult to use. I mean, even now, it's like quite complicated and confusing. I mean, now you can use a credit card, get an account on Coinbase, buy some crypto. That's not that hard. But if you try to sort of keep the control of the crypto yourself and not put it on an exchange, it's really like a process and requires a lot of focus. And then you have to worry about like, where do they put my hard drive that has the keys on them, which is basically just your password, your cryptographic password. And so, Bitcoin, 7 transactions, per second or minute. I wish I remembered which one, but that's not useful. So I think that one of the reasons crypto has not found its killer use case yet is because the user experience has not gotten good enough. Like it's, for the most part, it remains this kind of, you kind of have to be a crypto geek to really get into it. And the other thing is like, most people want the security of a bank. Like most people have no problem with the way banks operate. They don't need to like live in their sovereign castle, which they defend with semi-automatic weapons and don't need a police force because they're hardcore libertarians. Like most people don't care about any of that stuff.
Give it a couple of years. So you talked about selling the book in 22 and then sort of at the peak of blockchain everywhere and NFT and OMG. And then that crashes. I mean, what do you think we actually may learn and apply to our actual lives from this technology?
Even though the NFT froth was a bubble, I still think there are some potentially cool uses of NFTs. Like, one of the ideas with NFTs was that you could program into your digital piece of art that every time it changed hands in a transaction, a royalty would kick back to the original artist. So one of the issues in the art world, the physical art world, is someone sells a painting for $1,000 and then, a few years later it's being sold for $10 million and the original creator doesn't benefit in any of that secondary market activity. So the fact that you can program digital art to do sort of interesting new things like that, I think is a really neat, innovation. That's one. But this is one of the big questions. I mean, artificial intelligence, people were working on it in the 1950s, and for decades people talked about like the AI winter and nothing was happening with it. And people thought like, oh, AI is a pipe dream and it's just a bust. And, and it finally found its killer, its killer turning point use case. So I do think that could happen with crypto, and it just may not have happened yet.
Do you think that the environmental impact of crypto is going to limit its long-term viability? When do you think we're going to reach that?
I don't, because other than Bitcoin, like most other blockchains are not using the sort of proof of work, which is the really energy intensive process through which Bitcoin works. And so there's really, Bitcoin's the only like major proof of work chain to my recollection. And Bitcoin, I think, will keep going just because it is the OG. It's the, it's existed now for whatever it is, 16 years. And just the fact that it has had that longevity, people trust it. Like it's 16 years that it's gone without the protocol being hacked. It's 16 years where it's steadily gained in value. And so people now trust it. And so I don't think, despite the energy issues, that it's going away.
Why does Bitcoin have those issues and the other cryptocurrency currency
I mean, I know that you're a data scientist, so you will probably understand the answer better than I do. I mean, again, like the proof of work, which is the cryptographic puzzle solving race through which each block is, created and through which the blockchain is secured, involves all of these computers, processing an enormous amount of information in a race, and all the ones who didn't win the race just spent all that computer energy and didn't win the race, but they spent the energy. So that's very inefficient, right? And then the other cryptocurrencies use different protocols like proof of stake, and there are various other proofs of this and proofs of that, but only proof of work apparently uses that much energy.
What is your opinion about Bitcoin really moving into the mainstream and really becoming a currency that you can apply to buying a house, car, so forth? And how long will it take?
I mean, people have bought houses with Bitcoin, and
It's
like,
hard.
I mean, there are places like, in places like Miami, like you will actually see like, seller will accept crypto and stuff like that on the listing. But I don't think it's at all impossible that some version of crypto, in the future, would be used, especially for bigger transactions like that. I mean, the fees make it really unworkable for small transactions. But if you're so inclined, I think that will probably be more and more common that are like, hey, if you want to pay in crypto, we'll take it. I mean, the one issue with using Bitcoin as a currency, like let's say you go to a merchant and you want to pay in Bitcoin, like do they immediately sell it for dollars because Bitcoin might lose 30% between today and tomorrow? I mean, that's a real issue. So for merchants, like, to hold the money in its cryptocurrency form is very risky. So, but I could see maybe people doing it as a courtesy or convenience for big crypto holders who want to pay in crypto.
This is an amazing discussion. Thank you so much, Ben, and thanks
for
you,
having me.
Jason.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Jason and Ben, for being with us at the event and on the podcast. Listeners, The Mysterious Mr. Nakamoto is available in the store now, and Ben Wallace will also be at the Montclair Literary Festival on Saturday, April 26th. You can find out all about the Montclair Literary Festival events and our in-store events at watchungbooksellers.com.
This Thursday, April 17th, the Montclair Literary Festival hosts best-selling author Scott Turow with his latest thriller, Presumed Guilty, at Temple Ner Tamid. And next week, April 23rd, we welcome our podcast guests, Grace Williams and Farnoosh Torabi, to talk about Grace's book, Give Her Credit, the untold account of a woman's bank that empowered a generation.
And once more, don't forget to get your tickets to our live podcast recording on April 24th with Alice Elliott Dark and Dagmara Dominchik. It's going to be such a fun night, and we want to celebrate with you.
You can find out details and register for all of our events in our newsletter, show notes, or at watchungbooksellers.com. The Watchung Booksellers Podcast is produced by Kathryn Counsell and Marnie Jessup, and is recorded at Watchung Booksellers in Montclair, New Jersey. The show is edited by Kathryn Counsell, and original music is composed and performed by Violet Mujica. Art and design and social media by Evelyn Moulton. Research and show notes by Caroline Shurtleff. Thank you to the staff at Watchung Booksellers and the Kids Room for all their hard work and love of books.
And thank you for listening. If you enjoy the show, please like, follow, and share it. You can follow us on social media at Watchung Booksellers. And if you have any questions or ideas, you can reach us at wbpodcast@watchungbooksellers.com.
We'll see you next time. Until then, for the love of books, keep reading.